Thank you all for coming and joining a Beacon Leadership. We're excited to get this going. This is our pilot program. So, this is our first year and first presentation of our first year. So, bear with us as if there's any kind of um, clunkiness in our production tonight, but our presentation tonight. But if if any kind of feedback is good for us to know and kind of make adjustments before our next meeting. I'm going to go ahead and get started. You were here tonight to do a webinar and a um, training on how to train your trainers, right? Or so um, the whole idea behind Beacon Leadership is we have school personnel who are in that leadership role that wanted to kind of expand their knowledge on different training models and different evidence-based practices to bring back to your schools and then implement those training models in your own districts. Um, but for those that are unfamiliar, we are part of Idaho SESTA, which is the Special Education and Technical Assistance. The purpose is that we provide resources and that training for all of our educational partners across the state so that we can help support you in your mission to support students with disabilities throughout Idaho. That is a somewhat recent picture. Maybe, but that's our team, and we're all over the state. So we are reach up as north, far north as Bonners Ferry, down through Moscow, and west is Homedale. A few of us are here in Boise, and as far east as Franklin, which is basically on the Utah border. And we've got a few in the Twin Falls area as well. We're just kind of ready and positioned so that we can help support all special educators all across the state. We are a grant-funded organization that goes through the State Department of Education Special Education and filters through both Boise State and the University of Idaho. And we're here today because we are part of Beacon, which is a behavior education application cohort network. It is our mission to help support teams in their efforts to support behavior in their LEAs. It is a multi-year project, so we have two iterations of Beacon. We have Beacon Basics, which is a project that spans across a year, and we meet for an in-person kickoff, go through some behavioral foundations, and we work our way throughout the year through modules, learning how to fine-tune our assessment process or functional behavior assessment and building out our behavior intervention plans and using how to incorporate evidence-based practices into those plans. And then you're here because you're part of Beacon Leadership, which is our Train the Trainer. If you've been to a CESA training before, you've likely seen something, a slide to this effect. This is a training where, it's an open, we're going to be kind of communicating together towards the end of this webinar. And it is a space where you should feel safe to ask questions. And if you have curiosities about your practice or about something that's happening in your school, or just a general curiosity, feel safe to ask those questions. Your engagement is important. You've signed up, you've gone through the application process kind of in waiting for this information. So you're accountable for your own engagement by, attuning to the screen and kind of listening to what we're saying and then joining into those conversations towards the end. We're on Zoom today, but if you could keep yourself on mute unless, could raise your hand and we can, have some dialogue throughout the webinar. But for the most part, just keep yourself muted. Just I know a lot's going around, a lot on around. I know it's in the evening. You probably have some things happening in your personal life. Just, do what you need to do. But, this is your time to learn and try to stay focused to this because you are accountable for your own time. And we're going to do our best to get you the knowledge that you need. But just know that, any kind of questions are we're open to, and any kind of conversations that kind of come along, we're able to engage in so that we're all taking back some valuable information. So for today, in this webinar style, we are making sure that you're muted, and we have Suka and Jenny will be monitoring the questions. We're going to walk through some the Canvas course that you guys all registered for, either through Boise State or through U of I, and we'll kind of do a walkthrough of the different materials that will be available to you, and then the flow of the quarter and the format for this course. And then throughout the training, just be thinking of your potential trainees that you'll be bringing this information back and then training them on. So just think about your individual location and your, if you've got a specific staff that would benefit from this training, or if you have a full district that would be benefit from these trainings, to kind of think about this information and how you're going to apply it. Today, we're talking about behavior skills training, which in short is often referred to as BST. Behavior skills training is an evidence-based training that approach is used to teach new skills and make sure that they're implemented correctly. It's widely used all over. We just don't always know the name of it. But today we're going to define it, and you guys will be very familiar with how to apply it, and especially in those school settings, and how to train your staff to implement interventions with fidelity. Okay, so just to kind of take a pulse, for those of you, have you ever trained someone using behavioral skills training before? And in the chat, if you could let us know, yes, formally, yes, informally, no, and or I'm not sure. Maybe I have, maybe I haven't.
We have a yes, a no, a yes formally, informally, no, not sure, just kind of runs the gamut.
Okay. And that's fair. Until by the end of this, you'll be very familiar with what BST is, all the components, and how to apply it in the school setting. So if you're not sure, if you've never done it before, you will be by the end of this quarter for sure. So, what is behavior skills training? It's not really a lecture, it's not just a handout, it's not modeling alone, it's a complete instructional loop. What makes BST particularly effective is that it moves really into just going from telling someone what to do to making sure they actually can do the skill. And its research has shown that BST leads to higher levels of implementation and accuracy compared to just instruction alone. And in the context of schools, BST is often used to train staff on implementing behavior intervention plans or using reinforcement strategies, evidence-based practices such as prompting, or teaching replacement behaviors. If you've ever sat through a training and still felt unsure exactly how to apply it, BST, so if we've all sat through those trainings where we sit and get the information, BST really kind of closes the loop on that information, on that training loop. It builds that practice and feedback so that everyone leaves confident and capable. A question is, because BST is widely used in the behavior world, also in clinics, in homes, in hospitals, in companies that use organizational behavior management. the question kind of begs itself, is it practical in schools? But yes, it absolutely is practical. And it's something that we probably already use as teachers, but we don't really think about it as when we're training staff. It really is efficient. While it involves multiple steps, the components can be delivered in short and focused sessions that are embedded into existing meetings or coaching cycles or quick check-ins. You're not adding something entirely new. You're just being more intentional, like the way you train it. It's adaptable. It can be used across a wide range of roles and situations, whether you're supporting paraprofessionals implementing a behavior intervention plan or coaching teachers on classroom strategies, or you're trying to build it across a school-wide platform. It can be applied to any of those situations. It can be embedded into existing structures. So it's a key in schools where time is really limited. It fits naturally into if you have a PLC, different staff meetings or coaching sessions. And then it's really scalable. So once you understand the process, it can be used across teams, buildings, or districts to build that internal capacity. We are can use that. So a lot of times the BST is we use it in clinical settings, but it's practical for teaching adults on how to implement those practices in everyday school environments. We are teaching the classroom procedures by training staff on how to teach classroom expectations, transition routines, or instructional strategies. Instead of just telling teachers what to do, we kind of model it, practice it, and provide feedback, increasing the likelihood that they'll use it correctly. We can use it in crisis prevention. It's especially powerful when we're talking about crisis situations. Staff can rehearse de-escalation scripts and safety procedures and respond to protocols like their crisis intervention plans before they're actually needed so that they feel confident and pretty fluid in how to implement those plans. We can incorporate into data collection practices. We, use it for our behavior intervention plan and just different evidence-based practices that we use in our classrooms all the time. There's not really one right way to do it, right? You can do it in a small group. You can do it for one if you have a teacher that really needs to be trained on the use of prompting. You can use that to train your special education teacher. Maybe they need to kind of have their skills refreshed on prompting, and then they can then use those skills to train their paraprofessionals. It can so on that individual level, it can be used in small groups, whether you have like several staff that are trying to implement the same strategy. If you have a group of students that all have the same strategy in their plan, you can, train the group. You can do a large setting, like we talked about across schools. It's kind of think intentionally and to build those rehearsal opportunities in those moments, just because when you're talking about a large school-wide or big large group, it's more difficult to get those rehearsal and feedback opportunities, but not impossible, right? You just want to be thoughtful about it. And part of our intention today will be helping you think about the best way to train your staff in your environment, and how to scale it appropriately. And then finally, it just kind of fits into that in-class coaching, right? When we're just providing that instructional coaching, we really see those strong outcomes because we're modeling it in real time. They have the opportunity to practice in the environment that's needed. Those skills are needed, and then that feedback is immediate and then directly tied to the student. Okay. This is kind of just a preempt for our next before we move into our next section. But if you had to guess which, put in the chat, so either one, two, or three, what you feel like is the most effective training method.
We have threes across the board.
I feel like we have some people that might be familiar with the components of behavior skills training.
Fantastic.
Yep. So a trainer will explain, right? We're going to give a little bit of instruction. We're going to model it. So give that like display of what they're supposed to do, give them an opportunity to practice that, and then provide feedback. We mentioned before BST is a full training loop. It's a complete training loop. So it makes sure that we don't just stop at that information, right? Information is always important, right? That's the first step in trying to understand something, but it doesn't just stop there. We want to keep going and moving through part of it that explanation from explanation to demonstration to practice and then to correction. That's really how we can build those skills. It's really, we want to make sure that we are practicing this across the board and we come back and we revisit it to make sure that there's an understanding over time, right? When we sometimes we have that we've completed that training loop, we provided that feedback, but there's been time in between when you were had taught or had to practice the skill. So making sure that we're kind of adding that additional layer of maintenance to our training objectives. That when we go out to train our staff on a particular practice, that we've gone through the loop, we've done the instruction, the modeling, the practicing, and the feedback. And then, we can come back and make sure that they're still able to perform those skills. And that leads us into our second objective. Before I move on, do we have any questions? You could put something in the chat. Good. Okay. So, like the last slide kind of alluded to, the complete loop for BST is there's four components. We want to provide instruction, modeling, rehearsal, and feedback. So all four complete components must be present for that BST to be considered complete. We first start with kind of laying that foundation with instruction. We want to make sure that um, we have defined the skill clearly. We have we've kind of laid out those observable steps that we need to include, clarify when and where we would use this skill. We kind of want to remove assumptions from from thinking that they know the skill, right? If we expect them to know it, then we need to teach it, right? We need to provide the instruction for that. And then we want to use the skill, some tools, right? Do we have um, some instructional documents? Do we have a book or some kind of research article or an implementation checklist or some kind of written information that supports the instruction that we're providing? Instruction is a component of BST in action. Schools, we want to make sure the strategies feel practical and manageable and connected to the real classroom. So breaking a strategy into those clear steps so staff knows exactly what to do and when to do it. Using that simple language keeps focus on implementation rather than just kind of using that jargon or language that they may not be familiar with. And it's important to connect the strategy directly to the student their specific routine and their environment that they're working in. So it's just more effective when we're providing that instruction where it's actually being used. And then you want to make sure that they understand before moving on um, to the next component, which is modeling. But we would an example of a tool that we can use is an implementation checklist. This is our example. That we have kind of a screenshot on the screen of SESTA's implementation checklist. This lives on our Idaho Training Clearinghouse, and we can write out each step of a behavior goal or of a specific strategy. And we can use this to follow along easily. So we can provide it to our staff in which we're training, and we can use it for ourselves to make sure that they're completing it as written. And then we also can use it as a third layer for someone else to kind of come in. If you are training someone to train their staff, you can use it as that third layer to make sure that everyone is following along and doing what they're supposed to be doing. There's a lot of different iterations of implementation checklists. You can just write steps simply on a piece of paper. You can get very detailed with with different checklists. This is just an example of one that we have on our ITC and that we will be kind of using throughout our course. This is a great tool for providing that initial instruction on the different steps for those strategies we're trading on. So our first kind of discussion is just if you could describe um, if you've provided only written instruction when you're training your staff, what is kind of describe a time that was successful or when that was felt like it was enough to support your staff or your training in a skill. If you can take a second and kind of make an example of when just leaving written instructions for someone was sufficient.
We have a not very well, even with pictures, minimally successful. It was good for them to reference in the future. Ha, it's not. There's too much gray area and too much room for interpretation. Rarely successful.
Yeah. I mean, instruction is a key part to our behavior training. You're snickering at me.
I do, I'm known tasks that are needing feedback
Yeah,
with that.
yeah.
But alternatively, BIPs are living proof. Writing only is not effective in my field.
I feel that. Whoever wrote that, I feel that. It's a beautiful plan that sometimes takes up space on a shelf. But when we complete the loop, right, we begin with instruction because that permanent product of providing either that written document of using an implementation checklist. We are writing out those steps. They can see and reference those instructions. Like I do it all the time. I may have been taught to cook, but I may have been, gone through the loop of being trained how to create to do a recipe in my kitchen, but I'm constantly going back and referring to that recipe when I'm making it. So having that instruction is an important piece of the loop.
Another comment, which is valid, is that sometimes having that instruction, she relies on this in the moment when supporting a crisis or escalation.
Absolutely.
Just so you have that
Yeah,
permanent product to.
and it's like that written assurance, right? It's like it's here. This is what I can look at it, and I know that this is what I'm supposed to do, right? Like even though I might have not seen it done, like it gives a general guide on how I'm supposed to act in this moment. I agree with that. But I think most of us are in agreement that written instruction or instruction, verbal instruction alone isn't always enough to support a full understanding of a concept.
It's better than nothing.
Better than nothing. Which kind of leads us to modeling, which is that second um, rung in the loop. I guess that doesn't really work, does it? The next component of the loop, modeling is where we demonstrate the target behavior. We follow the same steps given in the instruction. We're doing it so that the person that we're expecting to do it can see it done well. We want to keep it brief and precise and show both examples of what to do. And sometimes it's helpful to show examples of what not to do. So that we're creating that visual model of what they're expected to do, what it should look like. Sometimes one of the biggest mistakes in training is that misalignment between instruction and modeling. If we've given the 3 steps and we model 3 steps, we don't want to, provide 5 steps in instruction and only model 3 of them, right? We want to be able to model exactly what we expect them to do. And they should match those implementation checklists if we're using one pretty precisely. It's really not about kind of performing it. And I feel like, at least in my practice, when I would go and provide training on a particular strategy, and we would practice maybe in a quiet space where the kids are at recess, and I would kind of provide that instruction piece, and I would show them what to do. Um, I got a lot of kind of flack at times because it's like, well, the kid's not going to sit there just like I'm sitting here, like we're demonstrating. And I know that. So a lot of times, if that was the case, and we had, I was in my particular case, I was a contractor and had limited time, but I would go back and try to train the special education teacher and tell to get in and provide the model in the moment so that you can see it done in time, in real time, because we know it doesn't always look clinical in the moment. So I kind of beat myself to it. Just watch me do this with the student. You can kind of narrate your actions and the next steps on what I'm about to do, so that you're not only are they seeing it, but they're hearing it. Um, and then you're going to do that in the real routine if appropriate. And so like, um, they're getting it in the moment and they feel like they have that support. Like they don't feel like it's impossible to be done. They have that example of like, oh, this is what it looks like when this student is in having a moment and I need to implement this strategy. It's not a very clean and clinical model in a space without children. You want to do it where they kind of like in real life or in real time. So in the chat, what are your thoughts about um, using a model alone? You may have provided that implementation checklist, and then you're doing the model. Um, how do you feel like that is how your staff respond?
We had one person comment, sometimes though, I don't want the student to know what I'm doing. Do I just point out to attend, kind of like, hey, I'm gonna go over here and model, and then discuss and provide the feedback
Yeah.
after the fact?
Yeah, I mean, and all of those considerations around reactivity, right? You might be the not the you in likelihood, like you're not the typical staff working with that student. So there might be some reactivity if you are just the person to come in and start providing that model. So you want to have that consideration when you're making the model. You might want to use a peer model, kind of you have a student that you could maybe have this has a social maturity, could be like, can you just act this out for me so that we were at least getting closer to what it's like acting or implementing with that student. It might not be that exact student because that just that your presence alone might escalate the situation. So being mindful of the situation you're in is always important. But also being mindful, how am I going to demonstrate this to my staff I'm trying to train?
Right. There's some comments in here about, modeling's better than just written instructions, so the two together. And then everything has a time and a place. Modeling is very helpful because you're not interpreting meaning from written directions. You're actually, it takes that subjectivity out of it. But if you're just modeling alone without the written directions, there might be some subjectivity with that too. People
Exactly.
are making assumptions or
Yep.
interpreting things differently. So everybody's being very thoughtful about thinking about the components separately and what
Hmm.
that might look like.
Great. The third component in BST is rehearsal. So this is where we're building the fluency. We're going to have our trainees practice the skill, and this happens immediately after we model. Like, okay, I do, you do. And then we want to make sure that it's structured and intentional. And then we want to make sure that they are repeating that until we see fluency, right? We want to have them practice the correct way. And then we want to make sure that we're doing that rehearsal in a safe environment for error, right? We don't want to be practicing this in a moment with a student that's escalated and practicing that. So this is where we might think critically about how I can get this, how do I can train the staff in the most um, similar way that they would be exposed to it. Um, so is this when I would use a role model, right? I might have another staff act out, or maybe a peer that has a little bit of social maturity. We can kind of give them a direction and then be able to act out, and then we kind of rinse and repeat that where we can provide that practice for them so that they feel confident and fluid in their ability to um, engage in that.
Yeah, there's some comments around that, just that skill building takes practice and repetition. And that role playing with a teacher instead of demonstrating with an actual student, talking through different scenarios and kind of role playing with
Yep,
those techniques could
absolutely.
work.
Yep. So this is kind of where this is when we're rehearsing, this is where learning becomes doing. Staff need a chance to practice it right away in kind of that low stakes setting. But the goal is to build competency so they can use the skill with their students. Um, we kind of touched on this the last in the comments too, just using that role playing with another teacher, trying it right away. We want to practice it. We want to provide that instruction, that model, and then having them try it right away so where it's fresh in their minds. And then it is in a natural situation where they would be using that skill as possible. And then our final, closing that loop, we want to provide feedback, right? Instruction lays that foundation, modeling makes it visible, rehearsal builds the skill, and then feedback really shapes it. Feedback is what refines the performance. And without it, like errors kind of tend to repeat themselves, and then accuracy can either slip or just remain, somewhat good. Um, So feedback should be provided immediately after the rehearsal, and it's got to be specific. So instead of just saying like that was good, you want to name the behavior and then deliver it like right after. So um, make sure that you're providing that specific feedback because it strengthens that exact behavior that we want repeated. And we want that to kind of align with our implementation checklist. We want those steps to go through, right? We want to, provide that feedback if we need to. If our trainee is kind of struggling in different steps, we want to be able to provide that feedback at each step. Or if they're, done a good job overall, being able to speak to specific things that you've have observed that they're doing well. That feedback is that final component. So it's that we want to make sure that we tell our staff what well first, right? We want to always start with the positive, and then provide a more constructive piece of feedback for that refinement. And then if we can come back to a positive, right? We're humans just like everybody else, and that we want to know what we're doing well. And if I feel like if a staff feels like they're and being the feedback is critical of them, it might like kind of damage a little bit of their confidence in performing that skill. So being mindful of how we went, doing that, what is it, a compliment sandwich? I feel like I've like in a lot of a lot of trainings around feedback,
Mhm.
right? We hear that we want to start with a positive, something that's constructive, and then end on a positive. It should be immediate in that moment and provide feedback like as soon as you see it happen. Be specific about it. Use that implementation checklist. And then if if they are still working on tweaking out or tweaking a particular aspect of the strategy, let's try again. Let's go back at it, have them repeat that rehearsal and feedback as much as we need to. So why? I mean, I think we've all kind of through our discussion gone through and determined that the full loop is best, right? Because we literally learn behaviorally. If we only describe a skill but never practice it, the performance can break down. So, I'm curious, like, who here has taken a foreign language class? Let's kind of equate that to behavior skills training. First, you learn the words and then the tenses, and then you hear someone say it correctly. Then you hear when your teacher has you try it, you say it wrong, and the teacher will provide you that feedback. Um, when I was in school, I was learning Spanish, and I read the words "estoy embarazada," and I thought it said "I'm so embarrassed." So in class, we had to have conversations with our peers, and my teacher heard me say this and pulled me aside. And after class, and to check in on me because it actually means I'm pregnant. If she hadn't corrected me every time I did something a little embarrassing, I would be telling people I'm pregnant. So, feedback's important. But we kind of, in learning, we're familiar with all of these steps, right? And that's how we refine our skills. BST is just that framework that we apply so that we're very specific and kind of about the way we're training because we know it works. Right? When we ask ourselves, is all BST created equal? Does it only happen if we just provide instruction, if we model but we don't rehearse, rehearse without feedback, Research has tested this exact question. There was a study that kind of did a component analysis of behavior skills training and found that instruction alone did not produce mastery. Modeling without rehearsal did not lead to consistent high performance, and rehearsal without feedback allowed errors to kind of persist. Only when all four components, instruction, modeling, rehearsal, and feedback, were used together, where the participants were able to reach mastery and we're able to kind of implement that with fidelity across time. And we will go through, if you've got a team, if you're working with a team and you're like, why do I have to go through all four of this? It's like I can just provide like a training sheet or just kind of implementation checklist and kind of and walk away because we all know time is um, a valuable commodity in schools. We'll give you some different studies and different resources that you can provide or kind of have those conversations around with your team to create that buy-in. Okay, so I'm gonna kind of run through this to kind of drive the point home. I'm gonna Um, mute or I'm gonna not unmute myself. You can already hear me. I'm gonna start my video. Can everybody see me? Does so
Yes.
okay, everyone can see. Okay,
And then
good.
people, I'm gonna turn my camera on. People can feel free to turn their camera on
Yeah.
or just follow along, however you feel comfortable.
Yep. Okay. We're just do like a quick little practice. So I am going to provide some directions and we're gonna see what happens. All right. I want you all to touch your nose. I want you to raise one hand. I want you to sit down. I want you to point to the ceiling. I want you to clap your hands. I want you to itch your ear. Right? So it's like I know. I'm sorry. I'm terrible at this game. But the whole point is, right, like we provide the instruction and then the visual, like it provides like if I'm doing something different than what I'm saying, it makes it confusing, right? Like we want to be able to match our instruction with our model, right? And then we know so that when we're not saying something and then doing another thing. We're doing as I say. Well, I don't think that went as well as it did in my head when I was creating the activity, but the idea is kind of the same as, right? We just want to make sure that when we're providing that instruction and we are, kind of modeling it um, as we expect it to be done. Because we know that when we're doing something different than what we've told someone to do, with the expectations get a little gray.
There was a comment, we tell people to do as I say, not as I do.
Yes, unfortunately, how I do. I feel like my mom said
Mhm.
that all the time. Just do what I say, not what I do. Okay.
And then they do as we do.
Yes, and then they do what I do as. So for fidelity, why fidelity matters, because we know that when we do what we said we were going to do, we end up with better outcomes. So one of these examples is one of these ways to kind of maintain fidelity is using our implementation checklist. You're going to hear a lot of implementation checklist talk about because the tool itself is very simple, and it provides like a couple different utilities, right? We can give it to the staff to provide that instruction. We can tell our staff who we're training to, reference that as they train. And then we ourselves can monitor that staff is doing and training how we said to train. And then that we can follow along and make sure that that the staff is doing what they were trained to do, if that makes any sense. So when we provide that instruction, the checklist kind of clearly outline the steps the staff are expected to follow during the implementation. Modeling, the checklist provides a visual kind of tool to follow along with the person's modeling, and then what correct implementation should look like. And then checklists provide that guide practice opportunities by helping staff follow each step during the role play or implementation. And then finally, those checklists help coaches provide specific objective feedback on what was completed correctly and what needs additional support. Okay. So this is where I think we'll kind of move from our training, the training itself, around the PowerPoint, and then we'll kind of open it up to more like discussion and like kind of cohort. I want to walk through first, our before we kind of fully get into that. I want to walk through our Canvas course so that you're familiar with how the each quarter is going to go. I'm going to stop the share and then share the Canvas. Was everybody able to get into Canvas?
And then, sub question, if you were not able to, is it because you haven't had a chance to, or was there a technical error? So we have some yeses.
Okay. I noticed that everybody did register and was able to, or had registered, whether you've gotten in and are able to access. I'm unsure. Okay. So when you do get in, if you haven't already been in, you guys can see my Canvas course, right? I'm sharing that.
Yes.
Okay. You will have each quarter, we will have a meeting like are having right now where we present the training to you. This is going to that the PowerPoint is going to live in Canvas, so that you can take that and then use it or adapt it for your LEA. It's complete with slide notes. And we provided so the PowerPoint lives um, in your Canvas course for each quarter. Every quarter will have the similar format. We'll go through it. Jenny and I will present the training, and then you will have access to a school-based copy in Canvas.
So that whole front end of that training that you just presented is the PowerPoint training that you can take and download and use within your own LEA and practices to
Yes.
train people on behavioral skills training.
And then you have a facilitator script because we know not everyone's going to be doing it on Zoom. You may have different iterations, like you might be in a small group for an individual or a large group. So we have a facilitator script that you can use. I mean, it's there to support your training, right? So however you deem that you're going to use the training in your LEA, the script is just there to support that. It's just another layer to reference. And then we have a RISE model. Oh no, a RISE module that we will fix. It was there this morning. So sorry, there is a RISE module that will show up here that you can use for your own learning, or if you're training your staff and then they just are unfamiliar with um, the particular practice that we are training on, that is a really good, quick tool for them to kind of equate them as like kind of that instructional piece to learning about that strategy. And then we provide an example of a implementation checklist because we'll, like Jenny and I will kind of model what that will look like. And then you will have the webinar recording. So you'll have this webinar recorded, and then we will meet um, at the end of our quarter, towards the end of the quarter. So for behavior skills training, we go from today, August 19th, and the last day of this quarter is October 13th. So it butts right up to our next session, which is non-contingent reinforcement. So um, we have this entire quarter to kind of complete, Jenny and I have an entire quarter to complete our BST loop with you, and then you will then go and, you know, pick a time and a staff to train them on. And then we will have office hours the week of August 31st and September 7th, which the link should be
Good.
in here. So you can just come on at any point between 4:30 and 5:30 on October 7th, or um, September 2nd, and September 9th. Those are the office hours. And then our next cohort meeting is October 7th, which you should have received an invitation to earlier today. Yes, and these are required components. So just checking in office hours can look like I've done this. It feels really good. Like a 5-minute check-in, or if you're like, I'm really struggling. I can't get my administrator on board, or I can't, figure out a time, like just to kind of, or a location, or I feel like I'm missing this piece. You can use us as support in that development or that training, implementation. So we're there to be able to walk you through it and troubleshooting, kind of be that sounding board, support with any resources that we may have, or whatever it is that you need to do the training in your district or at your school. Those office hours are meant for just to kind of be open, whatever your needs are. And that cohort meeting is meant for us to kind of come back all and just kind of discuss what worked in our individual district. Like I trained my only para, or I trained, we had a staff PD day and I trained my entire school. So whatever that looks like, and then we kind of talk about the strengths and weaknesses of that training, so that we can, learn from others. And if we're ever put in that situation where we might need to do full school-wide training, or, like I really have a hard time in my relationships with my paras. I see them, once a year or once, so, or whatever that your relationship is, you might learn from somebody who works more closely with that staff population. So it's just a good place to network and kind of bounce ideas and how things, strengths and weaknesses of your um, training experience that for that quarter,
And it's sort of how we're closing our feedback loop
right?
on behavioral skills training.
Exactly. Yep. Um, the components of the each quarter is you will have a training plan which is available in Canvas and that you'll download and begin that completing that with us on the second hour of this training. We'll kind of work through and kind of talk through what your ideas around how you could bring this information to your district, who is in most need of it, and then work through that training plan template so you have a really good idea of what your training is going to look like. This being the first, we're going to kind of work through what that training is to train your staff. But going forward, we hope that you have, what the upcoming quarters entail. We're going to be doing non-contingent reinforcement, prompting, and reinforcement strategies. So those are all different practices that we will be providing those PowerPoints, facilitator scripts, RISE module, and then support for your training and that implementation at your district. So kind of as you move forward in leadership, just kind of keep in mind like who would benefit from that non-contingent reinforcement piece, who would benefit from prompting, who would benefit from those reinforcement strategies, and try to think of like how I can get those trainings to be the most I can and most effective in your LEA. So today we'll be starting on our training plan template. You're going to complete it, as you kind of wrap your mind around what's necessary for your district, as we kind of brainstorm through it. And then everybody is going to be completing a pre-fidelity measure and then a post-fidelity measure. We want to know that the training that you provided had an effect. So you will be asked if you are performing this present or if you're presenting this training to a large group, you're going to identify one or two participants in that group before the training and then ask them to go through and do the steps in your implementation checklist before they've been trained on it. And then you'll provide the training and then you'll do your post-fidelity measure. So you will ask them to do the strategy that they've just been trained on, and then you're going to take that fidelity measure. So you're going to see where your training was the most effective. Does that kind of make sense for everyone? If you have questions about it, please just put it in the chat.
We're gonna need some yeses.
Okay.
I mean, proof is in the pudding, right? We're talking about it, we're describing the instruction, but we haven't modeled it yet, so.
Yep. So we are going to quickly model just what it would be like to follow a implementation checklist for a behavior intervention plan.
Can I answer a couple questions?
Absolutely.
Okay, we had one question about, are we able to select the implementation based on the school need? So, we'd like, each quarter's particular topic to be the identified, evidence-based strategy. So, for instance, what you're providing your training on this month is going to be teaching another person about behavioral skills training. So teaching them to fidelity those four components. And then when we move on to non-contingent reinforcement, depending on what kind of non-contingent reinforcement and what particular situation, you might be selecting a particular kind of non-contingent reinforcement and training somebody up to fidelity with that. Um, gotcha. So apparently I
Okay.
answered your question. And
Okay.
so that's kind of the flow. We had a question about when assignments are due. We did not put due dates in the assignment, but we need to be able to review and provide feedback and kind of aggregate data before our final cohort meeting. So that October 7th meeting for quarter 1, we want assignments in before then. And it obviously makes sense that you're putting together a training plan before you deliver a training. So you guys are very good at adulting. The assignment due dates are sort of fluid, but you'll want to kind of make sense of the sequence of it and then give us some time so we can look at your pre-post data before we meet in our cohort meetings on the 7th.
Yes. So the idea is you have like a month and a half to go through, identify who would benefit from this training in my district or in my LEA, and then perform the training and then do the pre-post and upload that before we meet for our cohort meeting. And then we'll discuss that in our cohort. And then if you don't get it in there, much beforehand, we have at least a little bit of time before our next time we meet for the next topic. We can kind of close the loop. If there's other things that we need to address with you, we have that week to kind of reach out and, kind of go through any questions or any um, things that may have come up in throughout your quarter. I hope that makes sense. Okay. So I'm gonna unstart the video. You can.
Surprise, we're in the same room.
Woohoo! We are going to model very awkwardly how to use an implementation checklist for a behavior intervention plan. You have an example checklist in your Canvas course. We are going to be modeling that. We created a behavior intervention plan that we will be following. But so this is just an example of a implementation checklist that you could use with your staff. Obviously, we don't know the particulars around uh, the training, like how you're going to present the training. So this is just an example. You will have an implementation checklist template that you will build out on your own. This is just an example, so we can demonstrate it for you. And again, this is kind of those like that layer on layer because we recognize that you are the likely instructional coach in your district, or you are the director, or you are in a place of leadership where you are going to be providing these trainings to staff. And we want to be able to support you in training you to be able to train your staff. In this situation, we are taking this implementation checklist. I am going to be the the trainer. Jenny is going to be the trainee, and then she will be our imaginary student will be who she's implementing it with.
So in a real scenario, it would be potentially Rachel as the consulting teacher in the district. I'm a special education teacher. Maybe I just got moved to middle school.
Mhm.
And we're discussing a particular behavior intervention plan and how to provide behavioral skills training to a paraprofessional in my room.
Right.
Real life stuff.
Okay. So I am going to make sure that we have everything that we need before we start. All right. My first step is I'm going to make sure that we are got all the things that we need. We've got our, according to behavior intervention plan, it requires a first then. And so I make sure that the materials are present and they have a copy of the behavior intervention plan. So, and I'm going to go through and explain each section. So in the behavior intervention plan, we want to make sure that we have our prevention strategies, we have our materials for our prevention strategy, which is our first then. So we want to make sure that our individual student knows what is expected of them and then when a break is coming. Um, for and then we want to make sure that we are going to preload them. We're going to verbally let them know when they can expect breaks throughout the session. So first we're going to do this, and then they are going to have a 5-minute break, and then we're going to provide that verbal explanation, like when you do these things, the next will come kind of in the future. We're going to give them more than just what's the first then, because visually that's too much for them. And then I'm going to the student, when the student is getting frustrated or is in need of a break, we are going to teach them to ask for a break. And because we want them to learn that asking for a break is better than just leaving. And then when they ask for a break, we're going to provide that behavior specific phrase and we're going to provide that break to them. And then if they try to leave the room without asking a break, we are going to make sure that because we know this is new for us, we're going to have our staff be by the door and we're going to go through. We're not going to provide a lot of attention by chasing. This individual does not leave the building. We don't have to worry about safety risks, but they constantly leave the classroom. So we are going to provide them with neutral attention as we stay with them, but not providing a lot of quality attention while they've left the room. And we're going to redirect them back to the classroom. And staff in the building are also aware that when they see the student walking, that they will redirect back to the classroom. Okay, so
So that was the instruction piece.
the instruction piece, yes. And we've gone through the copy of each section. We are going to model how to do this. So when your staff comes in and they are unsure of what to do, you're going to provide them with their materials in order to prevent the prevention piece. You're going to show them the behavior intervention plan and kind of walk through and provide that instruction for them. You're going to model how you're going to show the first then with the student, and then make sure that they are following those components to teach them how to ask for a break. And you're going to have an opportunity to rehearse.
Yep. So I would be with my staff, having all of the prepared training materials with my staff and myself. I would be reviewing this written instruction with them about the behavior intervention of providing a break and then what happens if the break doesn't occur. And then I'll be modeling each of those components with them. So how to do the first then with the actual materials, potentially with the student, but if the student's not available or if it's not right, I'll be modeling with them. And then they'll show me the same thing. And then we'll also do the role play and modeling of potentially the students eloping and what does that look like to provide that brief neutral and staying alongside but not kind of reinforcing that behavior.
Right.
And so I'll provide that model potentially, hopefully not with a student, just through role play because we don't want to instigate an elopement. And then they'll be role playing with me.
Yep.
Okay.
And then we will go back and then feedback would occur on that, right? So she's then trained her staff according to the steps, and she said, "Well, Jenny, you did a great job. Well done. You were really explicit about using the first then. I liked how you used your, prompting to have them use a break and how we practiced using that neutral voice when they eloped from the classroom. Nice work. And then based on that, we would go back and repeat our loop. If there was a specific area that we needed to kind of fine tune, we would go back and have them practice that with the feedback. And then you go and do this independently.
Mhm.
And then I will provide feedback and fidelity just to make sure that you're still like that what we've talked about and what you've been trained on is still what you're doing and that there aren't any questions that you may have.
Mhm.
Okay. I know, weird, I know. But in a modeling situation, we want to make sure that like we've demonstrated how to use the implementation checklist specifically for a behavior intervention plan, and then what that would look like for a trainer who's training somebody to train someone. No, you're training someone to train. So yeah, that was right. Yeah, too many layers, training, training, training. But
And the reason that behavioral skills training comes first is that that's how we're going to embed all of your training practices for the next three evidence-based strategies. So you'll be demonstrating how you're going to be providing instruction, modeling, um, role playing, and rehearsing and providing feedback for non-contingent reinforcement, prompting, and reinforcement schedules. So this is to get everyone on the same foundation.
yes.
Christian?
Is there a question we can address?
Yes, so one of the questions was about if there's already a pre-planned training
Okay,
on the books having to do with a certain subject matter,
okay.
would they be able to use components of this PowerPoint, the behavior skills training PowerPoint, and embed it into that pre-planned training? So to make it a little bit more like tangible, there's a pre-planned training about functions of behavior,
Mm-hmm.
identifying and responding.
Mm-hmm.
Would it be appropriate to take part of this package, this behavior skills training PowerPoint, and embed it in because you're then providing the training that's required for this Beacon leadership course? My answer is absolutely.
Yeah.
So the PowerPoint as we presented, and we sort of have a disclaimer on this, we're providing you this deck
Yes.
as is, and then you can choose in your LEA to download and modify it to use it in a way that's appropriate to your specific setting.
1,000%. So there may be components that most fit your purpose in your district for your training. This is an example that lives in a workable format. So you are able to download the PowerPoint and then use it and change it for your needs. Like know that the way that this is written, we feel confident that the full loop of BST, right, having those four components and recognizing that all those four components is technically BST. So if you take it and then modify it and take out the instructional piece and the feedback piece and only use modeling and rehearsal, is that BST? No. That's I doubt you that's what you're going to do, but just for an example, that is, you're able to take this and change it how you will for your needs.
The just sort of additional caveat is just be mindful of how you incorporate that training into that training plan that it's an assignment and your pre-post fidelity measures that are assignments, because those are going to be, hinging on the delivery of behavioral skills training. And so you'll have to just kind of be wrapping your arms around how you're going to incorporate those pieces into an existing PD training.
I mean, I can just off the top of my head, I can see how you would um, do what is the topic functions?
Mhm.
Where you would train on functions, but you can incorporate BST in how you would train. And then if you want to take your pre-post in that way, as long as you've completed the training on behavior skills training, um, that would work.
Did you want to talk back to this or do you want to open it up for?
Well, I guess so because we're still in, we wanted to provide that model for you, and that will live in the webinar recording. Um, for uh, your package for, as I mentioned in the beginning of the training, we had talked about, if you have certain staff that have a little bit of, apprehension around a strategy, or you just need to like kind of juice up the information behind the why you chose to train on this or you want to use this strategy. Additional resource articles kind of live in your Canvas. I believe I'm still sharing the Canvas.
Yes.
Okay. And then so you've got a couple here that are available and are accessible for you to reference. One is the use of behavioral skills training with teachers, and it's like a big review of how that works with teachers. And then we have scaling up behavioral skills training effectively a large scale multi-skill training. So if you're trying to do some things like district wide on several skills, like how you can, use BST that way. One that it's not free, so I didn't want, I mean, if you have access to like Eric or Springer or any of the publishers that kind of have a paywall, and if your district or if your college allows you access, then it's right. But I wanted to also point out that the guidelines for using behavioral skills training to provide teacher support, this is a great resource for teachers to use. Also, it could be used as a written instruction also for performing BST in schools. I don't know if we're going to take a screenshot of that one. It is available and but it's not open source, so I can't share it, unfortunately. But it's a good one. So I wanted to make sure everyone knew about it. Okay. I'm going to stop this. Go back to this. Okay. These are the two research articles that are in the Canvas course. We've kind of already walked through the components of your training package. Oh, goodness. Sorry, it's hiding behind my toolbar.
Mhm.
And then we do the model for you. Now we kind of want to take a minute to kind of just take a second to show how you could do this on a school-wide level versus small group and individual levels. So when we are looking at the school-wide level, you don't always need like big systems to start improving the implementation. It's sometimes it's more effective by like identifying a few common practices that all staff could use across settings and routines. And that was kind of our thinking when we were developing leadership was just what are some really common strategies that we see in behavior intervention plans a lot. And we know are not being implemented as they're written, right? So let's use those strategies and build out behavior leadership using those. And I'm sure that in your district you might be aware of like there, you know what? every single behavior intervention plan has the use of prompting, but I have never done a training on prompting, right? Like that's kind of where you know that there's a very common practice, but we're not seeing continuous practicing a practice around that. So you might want to do a school-wide training so you can embed that into staff meetings or maybe like a grade level collaboration, or like I said, the like your PD day, where you perform or not perform, present the materials and train on. It helps create that like shared language and shared expectations across staff. So when you're all responding similarly and using the same common practice, the students kind of get that consistency and that predictability across the school environment. You could be doing it at a target level. You might not need to train your whole staff. Like your program might be relatively small, or you might have like a particular group of kids that have this in their plans or practices that are being used. So you still need a couple handful of staff to be able to provide the training to and train them on. So that small group skill building allows teams to focus on particular strategies or intervention components that really need the strengthening. You can use like scenarios to help staff like rehearse so they could use each other. It really kind of bridges that gap between using the strategy and then actually being trained on it in the moment. You can provide that training in that smaller targeted level, and that feedback can come a little bit more specifically and immediately when you're working in those small groups, so that that team that is using those practices are pretty consistent, and have the training and know that they have team members that are also trained on it. If they have questions, they can lean on each other too. And then finally, at that one-on-one level, you might have a student that you will want to have your staff fully complete that full behavior. Like you want to make sure that um, it might be a relatively new staff, a one-on-one behavioral staff, and you just aren't 100% positive about their ability to carry out that behavior intervention plan. You might want to, create that um, one-on-one training situation where you use the behavior intervention plan and go through every section of that so that they're fully trained on it. And then you one-on-one, you can do more in context because it's less, um, they could be at a group ta or at a table, and then you can provide that feedback, immediately following. Again, we talk about the students and their activity and your familiarity with the student. But it also allows for that frequent database feedback, right? Like we are following with that implementation checklist, like you've done steps 1 through 7, like perfectly every time, but like I'm seeing this step 8 kind of slip. Let's practice that a little more. You have that data and that feedback and that because you're able to take data more consistently with an individual than you are a whole group. Um, does anybody have any questions on just like the scalability of BST? Okay. Okay. So I just wanted to kind of provide an example of kind of like a full BST example. And I just like drew how like a school-wide, how they respond to cyberbullying. So first you're going to stop interacting with cyberbullying content, save or screenshot the evidence appropriately, and report the incident to a trusted adult and block the individual if the platform allows. First, the instructor, for the instruction piece, you would explain each step clearly, like what cyberbullying looks like, why responding directly can escalate the situations. You might want to have like your school might have a four-step response, like stop, save, report, and block for the teachers to check before for understanding by asking students to restate the steps in their own words. So this is like how you're going to teach your students to avoid cyberbullying. And then the teacher might demonstrate the correct behavior by using like a mock online chat projected on the board. And then the fake message appears, and then it's kind of a negative message. First, the counselor is going to narrate, first, I'm going to stop responding. Next, I'm going to take a screenshot. Then I report it to my teacher. And finally, I'm going to block the sender. So if the counselor like models like an incorrect response, like they are arguing back, like it's not going to be effective. So we want to make sure that all parts of the training are implemented and modeled correctly. And then you're going to have the students kind of practice the skill in a small group using printed mock chat scenarios or controlled like digital simulation, where each student takes a turn responding to a scenario by like identifying a bullying message, walking through the four steps, and then explaining their response. And then peers observe quietly while the counselor takes notes. And then you're going to, or the teacher takes notes, and then the teacher's going to provide that immediate feedback based on that. Like you stopped responding right away. That's exactly what we want. You remembered to screenshot, but you forgot to the reporting step. Let's try that part again. So I know this is kind of like an abstract example of behavior skills training, but it's used all the time. Um, and we embed it into our instruction and we use that to teach our students. And then we know that that's most effective. So even while we're training our staff on particular behavioral strategies, we know that BST works on most any skill that we're trying to teach. And this school-based example is just cyberbullying. I must have read a study on it and it's like, oh, I can use that as an example. Okay. So in review, we've got all four BST components, complete the training, use the tools like your implementation checklist or your to support the training. And then you're going to offer considerations for quick uses in the next week, but in the next week is just going to be the next month. So when we go through our training skills template, our training plan template, and we kind of think about our use of BST in your district, I'm going to stop sharing, and we will kind of work through that template together. And if you have any questions, I think Jenny's going to stop the recording so that we can kind of just open it up to